Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Mastering Talent Management. I'm just going to wait just for some attendees to come through the door. We've got people that are just joining us now. I know sometimes it takes a while for Zoom to let people in as they come through, so I don't want to kick off and anyone miss any information. Right, so I'm going to kick off. I think we've got quite a few people in the room now. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Mastering Talent Management. My name is Marie Pegram. I'm a partner at Recruitment Accountants, and I'll be the host for today's session. As recruitment consultants, I think you guys know recruitment inside out. You excel at identifying and nurturing talent for your clients. Yet sometimes when you're so busy working with your clients, consulting them on talent management, that so often it's easy to overlook nurturing your own team. And I think it's that age-old adage of, cobbler's children have no shoes, meaning experts in the field can often sometimes neglect their own expertise in their own situation. I know personally, I was scrabbling around on the 31st of January filing my tax return, so I'm no role model in that arena. So today's session is kind of to address that irony head on. So looking at focus on retention of your key players, and retention isn't, as we all know in recruitment, it's not a nice to have in this industry. Finding those really quality people and keeping them really influences the success of your business. So today I'm really excited to be joined by two very knowledgeable recruitment experts, Stuart and Mark. Stuart, as many of you may have seen on previous webinars, Stuart is the founder of the Recruitment Accountants division at UHY. He works with a vast array of lots of different recruitment businesses, from startups to multi-million-pound corporates, providing everything from business advice, FD, MD support, long-term incentive planning, tax solutions, and back office services. And he's implemented a lot of long-term incentive plans with recruitment businesses. And today he'll be sharing his knowledge and experience around this. So thanks for joining us, Stuart. I'm also joined by Mark, founder of Mark & Co. I've known Mark for a lot of years. I don't know how many actually, Mark. It's been a lot of years. Mark is actually my personal coach, so I work very closely with Mark and can vouch for the support and things that he's given UHY. But he's worked with lots of different numerous businesses, developing and retaining highly effective leadership teams. Mark has developed executive development and retention programs that address those real core issues that prevent your key personnel from departing. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from both of you on this topic. For those that have attended our webinars before, we tend to have quite an informal style that we usually adopt, but today's going to be slightly different. We have got two presentations that we're going to be delivering today. But please feel free to ask questions as we go along. And use the Q&A function here. And then if you want to add any of your own thoughts or comments, I'll be monitoring the chat as well. And if we don't get around to answering any of your questions, just let us know, and we'll follow up after the webinar as well. So I'm now going to hand over to Mark, who will be sharing some insights on succession planning and advice around securing your top people. So over to you, Mark.
Thanks for a great intro, Marie, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to this. What I'd like to do, just get my technology working, right? Share my screen, bring this presentation up. And hopefully we'll get this from the start. Is that all good?
Perfect.
Excellent. Okay. So the first question, where we're going to start is 3 questions for you. And what I'd really like you to do is to take a moment to honestly consider these questions. Make a note of them, and then put them in the chat if you want to, but we will be looping back to them later. So the first question is, as the owner of your business, how long would it likely survive for without any input from you? Would it be a month, 3 months, 6 months, or longer? So that's how long would it survive for without any input at all from you? Well, that's the first question. The second question is, if you had to take a sustained break from your business of 3 months or more, and that could be due to a personal issue or something like that, and you had about a month to prepare for it, what would be the 3 main things that you would do to protect its viability? So Just want to take a moment to consider that. And finally, what do you believe the cost to a business is when you lose a key person in relation to their salary as a percentage? And if there's anything that's coming up in the chat, that's great, but we're going to loop back and cover some of this stuff anyway. All right. So yeah, if you just want to take a minute to consider those 3 questions, write them down, make a note of them, and if you want to, share them and we'll loop back. Now I want to create a scenario. So I just want you to imagine this, okay? And that is, just setting the scene here. You've built your business through trial and error. You've experienced the highs and lows that comes with being a business owner. As a result, you've learned lots of very important lessons over the years, especially the importance of implementing systems that provide sustainability, improve effectiveness, and of course, increase your business value. But just as importantly, you've recruited and molded a team of employees that know their job well, and in turn, you've rewarded them well. Now, your best and most experienced people are in senior roles, performing well. They don't require too much of your time now, unless there's fairly major issues to be dealt with or decisions to be made. But for the first time, you're feeling a real sense of freedom and you want more of it. You want to be able to make a lot more time off, to be able to take a lot more time off, to do more of what you want to do, and putting some of your hard-earned experience into some new projects and business interests. You feel confident you're now getting closer to achieving this with the team, and especially with your right-hand woman, Sally, at the helm. Sally's been with you from the beginning almost. She's at your eyes and ears, your most trusted employee, and she knows your business inside out. She's stuck with you through thick and thin when times have been really tough, and she's totally respected and revered by the whole team. You see Sally as your most suitable and natural successor, and you've spent many, many hours working closely with her, sharing your knowledge, training her and molding her, sort of knowing that one day she'll probably take over from you. And now that time's coming. You figure it's going to take maybe 12 to 18 months for Sally to get fully up to speed, but you can probably start transitioning your own work days down in 3 to 6 months. And you start to really feel excited about the future. Your mind starts to race towards all of the things you can be doing with your extra time. But then there's a shock. You call Sally in for a chat and you announce your plans for yourself and for her, which she stops you in your tracks. Sally's got other plans. Unbeknown to you, she's been approached by a bigger company, and it's one that's bigger than yours. It's in the industry, and it's for a very senior position. She tells you that she wasn't actively looking, but a really good friend of hers is working for that company, and she's put the 2 of them in touch with each other. So the more she's learned about this company and the role, the keener she's become on it. And there's been no secret made of how they were keen on her too. And she's expecting an offer imminently. Knowing that she's been a really loyal employee to yourself, this is going to be a substantial offer, and it's going to be a big improvement on what she's getting currently. So this all looks and feels like a knife in the heart for you. How could Sally do this to you after all you've been through together? And your dreams begin to fizzle out and a new, pretty bleak reality begins to kick in. Okay, so just consider that. Just imagine that scenario. And then the question is, so what sort of things might be done in this sort of situation? Okay, what sort of things might you do? I'm going to share with you some of the experiences I've seen with some of the clients I work with when this has happened. And sometimes it's got against the very advice that I've given. But, I've seen people do things like throw very large counter offers. And as recruiters, you'll know all about that. By the way, I did 15 years in recruitment before getting into this line of work as well. So I understand the journey. It might be counter offers. It could also be things like panic promotions for other people. So it's just a case of, looking at other people in the team and saying, oh God, we need another Sally really quickly. We need someone that's going to step in. But it's knee-jerk decisions a lot of the time. And those can be the sort of things that can be done if there isn't a proper plan in place. And they can all lead to a lot of problems. Okay, so I don't want to dwell on that too much at the moment. We'll cover a bit more of that later. But also have a think about how you might respond, how you might react to that. So the question is, why do people leave their jobs? And Marie is going to do a poll on this one for us, I believe.
Yes. The first poll I've ever done on Zoom. So hopefully that's popped up now. So there should be options in terms of why do people leave their jobs, and you've got an option of better compensation, work-life balance, limited career growth, company culture, or other. Just waiting for the answers to come through. Well, we've got a battle between the better compensation and company culture at the moment.
Oh, right. Okay.
Oh, hang on, it's changed. This is very exciting. I've never done a poll on Zoom when I've run it before. Okay. So we've got in joint top place, actually, better compensation and company culture, with work-life balance and limited career being down, limited career growth down the bottom. We've got no one saying other. So hope that helps, Mark.
Fantastic. Okay. All right. Well, there's been a lot of research done on this, as you can imagine, and this is the results that we've got. This is by a company called PEQ, and after their polls, this is what they came up with, and with the company culture being resounding 50%. And it's quite interesting, isn't it, as well, that actually better compensation was the least reason. But that can depend on which industry you're in, I'm sure. But they're the findings. And again, we can discuss that in a bit. But the question as well beyond that is, why do senior people leave their jobs? Okay. And this is a bit more complicated and a bit more complex. And these are in no particular order that I'm going to run through with you, but these are sort of the reasons that we find. Okay, and a lot of the time it's insufficient awareness and acknowledgement of the true value. And that's when the person in the role feels that they're not being utilized in the right way, that they're perhaps not being heard as well as they could be, and they're not making the difference that they'd like to be within that organization. Sometimes it's a deemed lack of sufficient opportunity for personal career growth. So that is, is this going to really take me to where I want to go to within this organization? And a lot of the time that can be just down to a lack of communication, and not aligning personal ambitions to where the organization's intending to go. Failure to align future organizational goals with individual aspirations. Again, that's a similar sort of topic. Lack of clarity, uncertainty on the organization's vision and goals. That's so important. And a lot of the time that can be sort of left and not communicated. And it's something that should be communicated really, really regularly, what the vision is, because people do forget. And it's one of those things I would say every sort of 3 to 6 months. Obviously, feeling overworked and burnt out is a key one. And especially the more senior you get, there's often people do feel like they need to put more in, just out of loyalty or whatever. So that can be another reason. And this is a big one as well. Challenging toxic relationship between employee and employer. So obviously that fits into the cultural side of things. And here's the other one. Salary is not aligned to market value. So that can sometimes be just an opinion, or sometimes it might be factual, but they're the sort of things that we're really looking at. So that leads me to ask this question: what's the true cost of losing a key employee? Okay, and again, have a think about this. We talked about it at the beginning, and it's something that you might have looked at. But in terms of percentage, what we typically find is it's about 50 to 150% of the exiting person's salary. Okay, and that's what most recruitment industry reports will tell you. But we say that's only part of the story. And we believe that the true cost can run into multiples of the person's salary. And here's the reason why. Okay. So the hidden costs of losing a key employee can be easily depicted by just looking at an iceberg. And we can talk about the tip of the iceberg. So the stuff that's really easily measurable, the tangibles, if you like, are things like recruitment fees, obvious, lost productivity, which is the direct side of that. So that while that person's out of the role, that's going to have an impact. And the longer they're out of the role, the more difficult that's going to be. And the other part is actually doing the things like the pay increases to other staff where they're assuming other people's work. So they're the things that are really easily measurable. But the intangibles are the harder things to measure. And they're the things that sort of sit under the water, if you like. They're the things that are more challenging. And here's an overview. Okay, so knee-jerk decisions. Well, we just covered some of those with some of the things that I've seen clients do in the past, and that is, panic promotions. It's things like giving panic pay rises to try and steady the ship. Those things might sort out the short-term issues, but the problem is they create longer-term damage, and that sort of spills into that cultural change damage. Why did that person get a pay rise and I didn't? Or if they've had a pay rise, I want one too. And I've seen this cause really, really big issues within organisations, and it's cost a lot of money. The spill-on effect can be actually quite devastating. And then there's things like the loss of knowledge and IP. If that person's been with you for a long time, they probably know a lot more than you think they do. And when they go, they take all that knowledge out the door with them and all of that intellectual property that you've got. So that can, again, be really expensive, and especially if they take it to a competitor and they start to use it. If there's a certain system that you've developed or anything like that, it can have massive impact. Then there's the impact on the remaining team. And things like morale, they can be affected, especially when the rumor mill starts. So people start, anticipating or guessing why that person left, or if things end badly, when that person leaves, that can have a big impact on it. So morale can be really affected by this. And what can that result in? Further lost productivity, but that's more indirect. That's because the team now are disengaged, and they're going to not be working as hard, or perhaps just, be off the boil. And the other things are the time to recruit and the time to onboard as well. All of those things are going to have the factor, and they're quite hard to measure in terms of what that's doing on all of those other levels we're talking about. One of the big ones is bad hires. Have you ever made a bad hire at a senior level? Because when that happens, things can, that's the sort of things that can happen when it's desperate. If you've been recruiting for a long time and it's starting to get to that point where if we don't get someone in here soon, we're going to be in real trouble. You might just ignore your gut feeling, bring someone in, and that can have a really bad impact as well. And I've seen it where people have known that they've brought in someone that doesn't quite fit, but they've sort of hoped that they will over time, and in the end, it goes wrong. And that can lead to that final one, and that could be one factor for the domino effect. And the domino effect is if one person leaves, then others can follow them out the door. So if the culture gets damaged, if things get badly affected by it, you can have a chain of people all wanting to leave. So all of those things can be, have a big impact. But these are the sort of things that can not just cost a lot of money, but if you're not careful, they can actually sink your business. And I've seen that happen as well. So again, is there anything in the chat, by the way, at the moment, Marie? Anything? No? Okay, great. So that's the sort of thing that to be mindful of when we're looking about the hidden cost of losing a key employee. So the next question is, what can you do to secure your future? So what can you do to better attract people, make sure they're engaged, and of course, retain them, because that's so important. And the sort of things we're looking at really is like having clarity on your values and culture. So being really clear on what your business stands for, what your values are, and making sure that everyone's inherently aligned to that, and that you're building a strong culture off the back of it, because it's a strong culture that attracts people and keeps them as well. And I'm sure I don't have to speak about the importance of culture, but it is one of those things that the more you can explain it, the more narrative you can put around it, the better it is. You can do things like psychometric profiling, okay? The idea behind that really is just to make sure that as people grow into more senior leadership roles, that they are going in the right direction that suits them. If you've got someone who's not really a people person, but you're trying to push them into a people-related role, then that can have an impact. So the more that you know, the more you can build a strong team, actually getting those resource mixes right, making sure that you've got the right mix of people doing the right types of roles. And that aligns with the next bit, which is get functional. This is a really, really common problem for small businesses that are growing fast. It's really easy to build your business around the people that you've got rather than build it functionally. I had this problem when I had my own recruitment business years ago. And that is, you've got your person that you think they're going to be the future of this business, and they take on lots of different roles. And what you actually end up with is a strange jigsaw piece that sits within your business that's irreplaceable. When they leave, they're doing so many different things that they're pretty much irreplaceable. And you'll have seen this for your clients that you're working with as well, where they just want this massive wish list of skills. And the reason is because there's just not a functional structure in place. So getting that functional structure is massively important. It does take time, it does take effort, but the sooner you do it, the bigger impact it is, and it adds massive value to your organization. Then, of course, there's succession planning, and that's thinking about all of those people that you want to bring up and making sure that it's viable, putting proper frames in place and proper plans for each individual within that. Leadership development programs ties in quite nicely with it. So that's about making sure that people have the people skills, the right sort of essential ingredients to become a leader and to be able to take the business, not just from a operational point of view, but from a strategic point of view to the next level. Enhanced communication, massively important. As recruiters, communication is a massive part of your game, but there's different levels of communication. And sometimes we can just assume that we know that that person's okay. We can say, actually, we've convinced that this person won't leave. They're doing a really good job. They're happy. I know they're happy. But it's those unsaid things that can really come back and bite you. And some people just don't feel confident having those higher level conversations as well. So if you can encourage open, candid sort of, so what's it called, that book, Radical Candor? It's a great book to read. That talks about all of these sorts of things so that you're having a different level of conversation, courageous conversations that actually bring you both forward and aligned. And this is what Stuart will be talking about in more detail later. That's the long-term incentive plans to make sure that you're keeping your staff happy and engaged over the longer term. So really this sort of brings us towards the close of this part of my section, but there are some key messages that I'd like you to consider and to take away with you. And the first one is never assume anyone's going to stay forever based on loyalty alone. And I'm sure you'll have all seen examples of that over the years. You know, just when you think that person's going to be there and they're going to stick it out, it only takes the right opportunity to come along and they're gone. So you can't build all of your expectations and succession around one person, thinking that they're going to be there just based on loyalty. You need to put a lot more into it. Don't underestimate the hidden costs of losing key employees. This is where I have a lot of conversations with people, and people are often astounded when they sort of see those things and what that can lead to. But also, I've seen the damage that it's done when that's happened, especially when someone's sort of halfway through a 5-year exit strategy, and the person that they're banking on to stick around hasn't, and they've just had to go right back to the drawing board. Money alone, as we've seen, is really the main driver, and I'm going to say it's really the main driver for losing good people. It may have a very important factor in it, but there's usually underlying reasons that go with it. Proper succession planning avoids panic decisions. That's what we want to be avoiding all the time, really, as business owners. We don't want to be making panic decisions out of desperation. The better equipped we are, the more plans we've got in place, the better things will run and the better decisions that will be made. We can't avoid some of these things that happen, but if we've got a good plan in place, we can make sure we're much better prepared to deal with it. Build your business functionally and not around the individuals you've got. Okay, so that's building it around the roles and responsibilities, the tasks and the functions, rather than around the individuals. That's a common conversation I have with a lot of business owners that I speak to. And finally, culture's everything. You know, the better you can make that culture, the stronger you can make it, and the more you can make it visible in terms of the narrative, the more easier it is to bring good people in and to keep them. And just a little bit about Mark & Co as well. So yeah, we've been working with the business leaders for many years, been helping them build effective leadership teams. And some of the areas that we cover are things like employee profiling, business and cultural diagnostics, exit interviews, succession planning and support. And there's an executive development and retention program as well. So that's me.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Mark. I think it's quite a scary scene setter you got there with Sally. I think we've all been there or been in similar situations where you just think, no, why is that happening? And panic. But yeah, and I think scary numbers as well when you talk about the 50 to 150% the salary costs when you lose people, and all the hidden costs. That's quite a big, that's a great picture with your iceberg. So it kind of really brings it into reality as to what can happen.
It can be quite extreme, and I'm painting more of probably a bleak picture than most cases, but it can be that bad.
Yeah, yeah. I'm now going to go back to what Mark's very important question on part of his side is what you can do to secure your future. And one of the points that Mark mentioned was about considering long-term incentive plans. And that's where I'm going to bring Stuart in on this call, on this webinar. He's now going to share his thoughts and experience around long-term incentive plans. So over to you, Stuart.
Thanks, Marie. Thanks, Mark. Excellent presentation as always. Right, I'm going to try and sort the tech out now. It's gone swimmingly so far, so let's see if we can break it. Right, can we see that, Marie?
Yeah,
yes. Okay. All right. So as Mark and Marie have kindly set the scene, I'm going to talk about some of the practicalities of how you can help secure the future for your senior team using long-term incentive schemes. It's important at this point that you guys probably all understand what long-term incentive schemes are, so I'll run through some basics. I'm not going to talk about commissions and bonus schemes. They are clearly very important for every recruiter and every consultant that works for you, but they're more short-term schemes that are there for different reasons. Okay, so long-term incentive plans principally are schemes which offer equity or cash to employees over a set period of time. In most instances, the type of schemes we're going to be talking about today, and there's only 3 of them, they are contractual schemes. So you will be entering into a formal contract with your employee, which essentially says, I will offer you this incentive if you stay with me for a period of time and we get to the end destination that we're trying to reach. Okay, the 3 types of scheme that I'm going to briefly run through, this won't take too long, is the enterprise management incentive scheme, the EMI scheme, a growth share scheme, and a phantom share scheme. The most popular is the EMI scheme route. It's something that we do many of these every year for lots of our clients. And the reason they are so popular is principally because of some of the tax benefits, which I can briefly talk about in a few minutes. When it comes to setting a long-term incentive program, what's important is you understand what you're trying to achieve. I think Mark spoke briefly about being functional. I've seen a number of schemes put in place where they're put in place for the right reasons and the intent is good, but sometimes they're not really worth the paper they're written on, because actually the employee doesn't understand the journey, and even the owner of the business doesn't understand the journey they're going on. They're just putting in place a scheme because they think that that contract is going to tie somebody in for 10 years. The reality is, with these kind of arrangements, they can be easily exited by either party generally. And that happens now and again where there's misalignment between what we thought was going to happen and what the reality of what is actually happening. So please understand what your objectives are. Why are you doing this? How do you want to incentivize these people? What do you want to give them? Do you want to give them cash? Do you want to give them equity in your business? Do you want to give them equity today? Do you want to give them equity tomorrow? Do you want to give them equity in the event something happens? All of this needs to form part of your succession plan. It's important to obviously contemplate the ownership of your business, the size of your business. There are certain rules around these schemes that can be preventative. Group structure is a good example of one example where EMI schemes cannot be put into subsidiary companies. They can only be put into group holding companies. Okay, so there's lots of technical bits and pieces in the background which we won't talk about today, but if it's something that you're interested in understanding whether you're eligible, then just feel free to drop Marie or myself a note afterwards, or ask a question and I'll try and answer it. Okay, so an EMI scheme in principle is an offer to an employee to buy shares in your company at an agreed price, providing a certain event happens. Okay, that event can be an exit, which is the most common. So you stay with me for the next 5 years. If we exit together and get the value we want together, then you will get a share of the sale proceeds. That's extremely important, and we see that process that's the most common setup we see, because the key employees are essential to maintaining the valuation of your business. And a buyer is going to be far more interested in a business which has a number of people in it who are either big billers, managing directors, senior employees who are running teams, because it enables the transition to happen much smoother. Okay, so I guess the point is let's understand what the event is here, and that starts with designing the program, and this is why I'm going on to talk about what the process is here. So why are we doing this? What are we trying to achieve? What does this look like for you and for the employee in the event that you both agree to go on this journey together? The next step of the EMI process is to understand the valuation of the business, and we need to go off and seek approval from the revenue for the valuation of the business. The beauty of doing this at today's date is that the valuation is often the valuation today, which is lower than the valuation we're going to have in the future, and we can significantly discount that valuation because in all likelihood you are giving away a very small percentage of your business. You might be saying to employee A, or Sally in Mark's example, you can have 5% of the proceeds of my business if we sell in 5 years' time. We value that 5% today, that option today, and that is viewed as being much lower value than what it would be in 5 years' time. Okay. Once we've sought and agreed that with the revenue, we then go and start to produce the documentation, the contractual documentation. At this point, we bring in a lawyer. Oh, sorry, I'm jumping forward now. That's this first technical failure. So we produce the contracts, and we engage at the same time with the employees in terms of what that contract means for them. We ask them to go away and get advice. Look, don't get me wrong, that communication box being in that position, the reality is communication flows through this whole diagram. You're not going to design a scheme for somebody if you think they're not at all interested. You're probably going to have a conversation up front. Okay. We then move on to actually executing the contract. That contract takes, in my view, the process is 0 to 3 months really to get this done, from design through to valuation, waiting for the revenue to approve and give clearance, through the communication, the execution, and then the registering of the contracts with the revenue. And beyond that, we then have annual maintenance that goes on, which is a bit of form filling really. Okay, so that's the process in outline. Oh, I'm definitely making a mess of this now, Marie. So yeah, my fat fingers have just pushed all the buttons far too quick. That's an EMI scheme, basic overview of the process and what they're for and why we put them in place. Alternatives to EMI schemes are, I've just flicked through the 2 slides. One's a growth share scheme, A growth share scheme is also an equity scheme. It's a scheme whereby you effectively give real shares in your business today, but those shares are only entitled to growth in your business. Okay, so if your business is worth £1 million today, we issue some growth shares which say that employee A is able to share in the value of any growth above £1 million. Okay, it's a contractual arrangement. There'll be triggers, there'll be targets, there'll be ratchets, there'll be events that will all be scheduled in exactly the same way as an EMI scheme. And it's particularly attractive to those businesses where I see it most is subsidiary arrangements. So where you've got people that are in certain departments or certain companies within your group, which you want to incentivize, but you don't want to give them EMI incentives over the whole outfit, which you would otherwise have to do if you went down the EMI scheme route. Okay. So it's a sensible alternative, but a lot less common than EMIs. Even less infrequent is a phantom share scheme. A phantom share scheme is effectively what it says, in that it's not real shares. It's effectively a cash bonus. It's a contractual cash bonus. Again, the same ratchets, the same contract, the same events, but monies are paid out as cash rather than equity in the future. So an individual will get a bonus. The downside to these kind of arrangements is they're quite expensive from a tax perspective. An individual's paying income tax and national insurance on these transactions, and an employer's paying employer's national insurance. So they are glorified bonuses. Okay, but again, they go beyond the traditional commission and bonus arrangements we see throughout all businesses by making them contractual. Okay, helping tie in those people in the longer term. Okay, so that's just a few more pointers just to emphasize what I've just said. Okay, in all instances, it's important to understand that there is no physical cash outlay in any of these instances until an event happens. So in a phantom share scheme, an individual will not be entitled to cash until that event happens. In an EMI scheme, an individual, for example, in a exit only scheme, will not be entitled to any proceeds or will not become a shareholder in your business until that event happens, till they then exercise their options and choose to take a part of that transaction. Okay, so even though you're putting a contract in place, you are not giving shares away today. You are giving away the option for shares in the future. All right, so in summary, these are excellent schemes for your high performers and for your senior management team who you see as your success or your successors. Okay, they are also, if you are considering a sale in the future, it can help towards management buyouts. It can help them get a foot in the door. Equally, if you're considering a third-party sale, these schemes give them a share of the proceeds, make it worth their while, them hanging on with you. And it actually can help drive up the value of your business because a buyer, as I mentioned earlier, will see your business as being more valuable with these people in them. Okay. I think that's it pretty much, Marie, in summary.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Stuart. So you really enjoyed sharing.
I hate tech.
Thank you very much.
We have a Not a Tech Expert award, don't we, Marie? And
Yeah.
I'm definitely in the running now.
I think, thank you very much, Stuart. I think the names of the shareholder schemes the share schemes always crack me up. I think when you've got phantom share schemes, I think that's always grabs people's attention. I think we've got a couple of questions that have come through, one of which I'm going to direct at Stuart, if that's okay.
Right.
Just to clarify, I know you kind of covered this in your presentation, but if you're a business owner and you don't want to give equity away, what options do you have?
If you don't want to give equity away, so what? Ever?
Doesn't say that.
Okay.
Maybe in the future. But I think right now they
so-
don't want to just give shares out to people in the
Yeah,
business.
so it's important to understand that an EMI scheme is not giving shares out. It's giving an option to acquire shares in the future. So you would ring fence some share capital within your business, and you would say, I am willing to give 20% of my share capital to my key employees in the future, provided we hit certain goals. And that could be, let's say, provided we get a valuation of £5 million when the business is currently worth £1 million today. Okay. It's only at the point that event happens do you actually, we'll say, give equity away. You don't even necessarily give equity away because they're effectively cashing in. If you're selling on that day, you are basically, the individual would cash their option in on the same day as they would sell their shares. So they never become an owner of the business. So they don't get a foot in the door as a shareholder. Okay. What I've seen, some of the problems I've seen in the past actually, is where people go off and they make promises to employees. Oh, I've promised Joe Bloggs that I'll give them 10% of the business. And it's a bit like, okay, well, you've got a problem now because you've set an expectation. So that individual is expecting shares. If you have these conversations in a slightly different way, we find solutions such as the EMI scheme, a growth share scheme, or ultimately cash in a phantom share scheme or a bonus arrangement. I've waffled a bit. Does that answer?
Yeah, that's spot on. I think
Yeah.
with your answer as well, what you've just mentioned is kind of led on to the other question that I've got, which is what's the most common mistakes you've seen business owners make from your experience when it comes to retaining their top performers? So I think you've already mentioned about over-promising and possibly not delivering on those promises, but is there anything else around that you've got, Stuart?
Yeah, I think that is the biggest one. So people making promises without understanding the implications. So it's effectively, the mistake is not making those promises. The mistake is not getting the advice first. If you take the advice, then you can absolutely go in and say, we want to offer this new employee or this current employee an arrangement which is really attractive for them. But it has to be structured in a set way. Otherwise, there are problems. Okay. And of course, that leads to potential discontent between the parties, doesn't it? If you say something and then have to unwind your promise 3 months later because it's I don't know, for example, it's going to create a horrible tax bill that nobody wants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just quickly, the other thing I would say is people just put these things in place without any thought.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to give my senior employees an EMI scheme because that's what everybody else does. EMI schemes are only worth the paper they're written on if the individual believes in the owner. They've got a bit of a bad rep from sort of, I guess, my generation 20, 25 years ago, because they were used a lot to incentivize people, particularly exit arrangements. And in reality, the owners never, ever had an intention to exit. And so now they've got this reputation that is it actually worth the paper it's written on? So they have to believe in you, and you have to really want to go on the journey that you say you're going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I've seen that numerous times. I think I've seen when you mention EMI schemes to your top people and they've had them in the previous firms that they used to work with and they don't believe in them. They've been tarnished already. Okay, I guess, Mark, is there anything else that you'd like to contribute on that question in terms of what's the most common mistakes you've seen business owners make when it comes to retaining their key players?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest one is what's already been mentioned around assumptions. Just assuming that people are going to stick around and assuming that everything's okay. It's regular contact, and it's about shaping the future together as well. That's part of it. We all know, that change is constant. Markets change, industries change. And when we're talking about things like leadership, for example, that's a big part of it. It's not just being better at doing operations. It's about thinking about the future, looking at the external factors. Where's this industry going? What are going to be the game changers? So when you're sort of factoring all of these things together, it's important to keep that dialogue really tight, and just not to assume that anyone's just going to stick around just because they're getting a good salary and because they seem happy. Anyone's head can get turned if the right opportunity comes along. So it's about making sure that there is that dialogue to be creating a better future, and making sure that people are fully engaged in that process. That's what I would say. So it's just avoid the assumptions.
Yeah, I think partly what you've touched on again with your presentation and just there was about the communication. So if what do you communicate with your top players? Like how much detail do you go into about the business? If you're looking to sell, do you tell people that you're looking to sell?
Well, again, that's a very personal thing, and it depends on. That's going to change from business to business. I've seen that where it's worked, and I've seen it where it hasn't. And again, it all comes down to the culture that you've created. So if you've got a very open culture and you want people to share, and I think that's more commonplace now as well. I'm seeing that there's a lot more transparency within organizations. Then that's fine. I mean, obviously there's some things that are going to be very sensitive that you wouldn't share. But if you are going to have a vision, and it's going to be a tangible vision and maybe a 5-year plan, you're going to certainly want to share that with your key people or elements of it with them, so that they're fully bought in and they can see the milestones that you're aiming for and what part they're going to play, so they can see where they're part of the journey. That to me, I think is really helpful for any employee to have an understanding of where they're going, where they're going to be intrinsic to the business and its future and its growth. So anything like that, I would encourage. But if your culture is quite closed shop and it's directive and it's then it's going to be a different game changer, really. So it's going to be one of those factors that you've got to consider. But I always go back to choose what your culture is going to be first.
Yeah, great point. And Stuart, have you got anything to add in terms of the businesses that you worked with, how much should be communicating with their top people, especially when they're going through, if they're looking at long-term incentive plans and things like that?
Yeah, it's probably more of a personal opinion, Marie. I think Mark's hit the nail on the head, to be honest. Every business is different and every business owner is different. I'm very much for being open, engaging with these people. We shouldn't think that businesses are going to continue in the same way as they have been forever, just as we shouldn't think that an employee is going to stay with us because they've always been with us. A business evolves, a business goes on a journey. A business owner might want to stay in their business for 25 years. They might not. They might want to exit in 5 years. It's no bad thing. And the more open you are, the more you find the right people to be on that journey with you.
Yeah. I think also with the communication, I guess, Mark, that you were talking about in terms of aligning your key players with the owners of the business and having that open, transparent conversation. You mentioned psychometric profiling. Now, as recruiters, you see that at interview stages when people are looking to engage new recruits, but how does psychometric profiling help with retaining top people? I think the book Surrounded by Idiots kind of brings to mind here a little bit. I don't know whether you read that, Mark, at all, but I guess that comes into this.
It's my list. Yeah, okay. Psychometric profiling, there's 2 levels. It's the individual understanding themselves, and it creates better communication flow and more understanding. So especially, we're all different. Some people are, I mentioned it earlier, more people focused, if you like. Some people are very systems focused. And where there's polar opposites around things like that, then you can have a breakdown in communication because they're just not getting each other. But if you can bring awareness to that through the profiling, then it can be, okay, now I understand when I start talking about this type of subject, that person switches off. I just think they're being rude, but no, it's just not the way they're wired. So the more you can do that, that's great, but that's more at an individual level. But when you're looking to build highly effective, highly functional teams, when you look at the whole dynamics of that and you understand what those dynamics are of each individual, then you can really construct much better effective teams. And it avoids shoehorning people into a particular type of role that they might not want to do, or they might. I've seen this before. People feel, and we sort of touched on this earlier, but people can sometimes feel that they want to do a type of role because, from an egoic point of view, for example, they might say, I want to be a manager because I think it comes with some status. But actually, once they actually do a management role, they realise it's bloody difficult, and that managing people is challenging, and that people are unpredictable, and they may not have the skills to do that. Psychometric profiling will flush that out, and it's not that one person's better than the other. It's just a case of knowing yourself and helping your colleagues to know you and each other.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think what I've seen quite often in recruitment businesses is you have your top biller that you think, they're brilliant. Oh, hang on, I'm going to put them in a management role now. They're going to head up this department. And their engagement goes down. They're not doing the job they love. They have to manage people. They're not aligned with that kind of role. And then they leave and you wonder why they've left. I don't know whether you've seen that at all, Mark, in some of the clients you've seen.
Absolutely, and I've had the same problem myself as well in my own experience. So yeah, absolutely, it's a really common thing. Just there's an assumption a lot of times that good billers are going to make good managers, and some do, but quite often they don't.
Yeah, completely. And there's another question that's come through about functionality. Now, you mentioned functionality. When you get someone that's their roles evolved and they've added on lots of it, how do you transition to become more functional? So you've got someone that's got lots of different roles, the roles sort of blown out like this, and now you want to almost undo it. Have you got any advice around that, Mark?
Well, I could spend a whole day talking on this subject. It's a big, complex beast, this one. But look, the thing is there is a process to it, and it doesn't start necessarily with the individual. It's looking at the organisation as a whole to start with, and then being really clear on what the functions of the organisation are, and sort of mapping that out. And then it's a case of looking at the individuals and saying, right, which individuals have we got that can perform each of these functions? And if you've got too many, or if you've got one person that are covering too many functions, then you've got a bit of a problem. So, it's about really starting to look at the organisation as a whole. And there's a mantra really that you can use with this, and it's eliminate, automate, and delegate. Okay, so it's eliminating those tasks that a certain person shouldn't be doing because they're getting spread too thin. It's looking where you can automate processes. And also delegation is the key one. Some people just are not very good at delegation, and they need some coaching and some training on how to do that, because it doesn't come naturally to everyone, and it all depends on the way we're wired. So functionality, it's a complex beast. It takes all of those sorts of things into consideration, but it's an organizational view and an individual view, and it doesn't just work in one way. It all has to fit together. But it's a process, and it's an ongoing thing. It's a job that's never done, but a business can become functional, both culturally and commercially.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think one of the things that we've done internally, which I've found particularly useful, is when we've put together job roles and responsibilities. Part of that responsibilities is we actually put what isn't their responsibility or what they shouldn't be getting involved in. So it's really crystal clear as these are the things you should be doing and these are the things you should definitely not be doing. Because you find sometimes as you move people up the organisation, they still retain some of those tasks that they're supposed to be doing that we were doing previously, and then they end up getting to this dysfunctional role at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other thing as well, which you know very well about, is about, you know, making sure that there's proper ownership and proper accountability and all those sorts of things that are in there as well. So there's clear lines of communication. So it does take time and it's a process, but, you know, once going through it, it has massive, massive payoffs. So it's a complex beast, yeah.
I'm quite conscious of time, so I've just got one more quick question to ask. I think we'll direct to Mark, if that's okay. What's the first signs that you think are highly valued employees might be considering leaving your organisation, and how should you respond to that if you think someone might be looking?
Well, first thing is, the first part of the question, how would you know? Usually it's going to be a change in behaviour. You know, quite often when we've seen people want to go, they might become disengaged, but it's typically a change in behaviour. So they might not be quite as conversational. You know, you just got to really sort of trust your instincts with it. And that leads to the second part. It's about having the conversations. It's, you know, being open and available to say, you know, is everything okay? We have a chat, you know, what's going on for you at the moment, and making sure that dialogue's there. But I would honestly say, don't wait till that point. Don't wait till you suspect that someone's going to leave. You should be having those conversations anyway, especially if it's your star performers, because the damage can be so great. So you want to be encouraging that all the time. So yeah, be proactive.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And I'm actually going to just put one more question in that's just come through. I'm going to direct this at Stuart, if that's okay. What is the best way to reward your top billers, commission or annual bonus?
Depends whether or not they are team leaders or they are individuals. If they are individuals, and they are sales people, they just bill a lot, I would leave them in the sales arena and continue to pay them commission. If they are managing teams, their billing will be affected. I tend to prefer to see some kind of bonus arrangement based on team performance. They may get, it may be a hybrid model. Okay. But it's hard to switch from, for example, a monthly or quarterly commission arrangement to an annual bonus arrangement. That's quite a shift, and you may find some pushback from the biller at that point. You've got to sell it to them. If that's what you want to do, there's got to be something in it for them.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Stuart. So that kind of brings us to the end of our webinar. I just want to say thank you so much to Mark and Stuart. It's been really useful in terms of sharing your insights today. We have recorded this webinar, so we will be sharing this afterwards. If you want to go back and have a look at any of the information or go over a couple of the points, then you can do. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's attended today. We will be following up with contact details should you wish to connect with either Stuart, Mark or myself, or if you've got any other questions as well. And before you go, we have got a share options guide, which can be found on our website at recruitmentaccountants.com. It's a pretty comprehensive document that covers the share option schemes that Stuart was talking about, and we'll send a link out to that as well. We'll be doing more webinars, so keep an eye out on our emails and social media posts. And that's it. That's all for today. So thanks very much for joining, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Marie. Thanks, everyone.